Hello, welcome to this next panel, which is titled Social Communication During a Time of Social Distancing. My name is Karl Knights. I'm VP of Revenue at 4C Insights. And today, to talk to this topic, I have three perfect panelists from different perspectives of the industry. And I'd like to hand over to them now to introduce themselves and their company, and then we'll get into the topic in question. So, Sophie, let's start with you.
Hi everyone, my name is Sophie Tai and I am the head of Instagram and Snapchat at Lad Bible Group.
Thank you very much, Sophie. Reese, let's come to you next.
Hey everyone, my name's Reese and I'm a partner manager at Twitter.
Last but by no means least, Mark.
Hi everyone, I'm Mark Sandford from the Book of Man. I'm the co-founder and commercial director over there.
Thank you very much, everyone. So for those watching this panel, you're going to learn a little bit more about each of those companies as we start to dig into some of the topics that we think are relevant to enabling social communication during this unique time of social distancing. So to kick things off, perhaps an obvious thing that we have all lived through ourselves and we would expect is that during these past 3-4 months, the adoption, the usage of social media has increased quite significantly. Reese, I'd like to start things off with you. I think I'm right in saying Twitter has seen daily active users increased by anything up to 24% during the last 3 months. I'm interested to get a sense of what some of the innovation is that you've seen from your perspective at Twitter.
Yeah, no problem. I think one thing to add there, it's actually daily monetizable active users. So even
Thank
more
you for
so,
correcting me.
no
Thank
worries.
you for correcting me.
Even more so than daily active growth. But yeah, we've seen that increase a record 24%. We're seeing conversations around areas like gaming and TV rapidly increase on the platform as well. Again, things that you would expect. Gaming, for example, has seen an increase in conversations with Twitter of up to 39%. In terms of innovation, I think it's an interesting one because during this current climate, it's definitely the case of forced innovation, right? So publishers are looking for ways to cement that communication and that connection between their audience. And this could come in a variety of different ways. One of the things that we've seen an increase of in terms of innovation is around the use of live. This is a product and a tool that's been around for a little while, but it didn't quite latch on in the way it's done over the last few months. We're seeing live increase from publishers from the likes of Hearst, who've done amazing things going live on Twitter and other social platforms, and also the likes of IGN and BuzzFeed. BuzzFeed in particular, we worked with to bring their What to Watch show to Twitter, which was a live show helping people understand what they could be watching on TV. The great thing about this is we also saw that engage brands as well and actually had a number of brand partners come on board. So yeah, there's definitely been a lot of forced innovation over the last few months.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Yeah, it's an interesting perspective, isn't it? The greatest innovation often comes out of, unique scenarios or opportunities of scarcity to interact with each other, which has been in person anyway, a challenge over the last few months. Sophie, the scale of your audience at the Lad Bible, is enormous. So, I mean, what significant changes have you seen during this unique time?
Yeah, I mean, we decided on quite a few different things quite early on to kind of, we're facing this kind of, I hate the term, but unprecedented time. I think with Instagram, for example, we decided quite early on that we wanted to bring a slice of positivity to people's news feeds. If we think back to what a long time ago, the end of March feels like, there was a lot of confusion, there was a lot of misinformation, there was a lot of scaremongering around. We decided very early on that we wanted the Lad Instagram to be a place of positivity as well. So we've seen, I'm sure across, all of our brands and everything, we've seen huge increase in engagement. You know, we've absolutely smashed all previous engagement records. You know, we keep track of things like, you know, likes and comments and things like that across Instagram. You know, I think we've broken records 3 or 4 times over during lockdown in terms of engagement, and it's all been behind positive stories. So stories about Captain Tom completing his laps, stories about doctors coming back out of retirement to go back into hospitals. So that's been one way we've kind of looked at it. Another thing we've done is we've really listened to the audience. That's always been at kind of the core of what we do at LAD. And I know that on Tyler, our female focused brand, you know, very early on, on Instagram stories, we were reaching out, we were using the native interactive elements of Instagram stories, you know, setting up polls, asking questions, getting answers from our audience, you know, just asking them like, how are you guys feeling? Are you feeling pretty calm about this? Are you quite nervous about it? Information to inform content, and we created a series called Lockdown Alone, which was really focusing on women's stories that are in these situations in isolation. You know, we had a story from a woman who had just gone through a traumatic birth and was now in isolation with her and her child and cut off from her support network. And then the final thing that we've done is we've kind of buck stereotypes, I think, about what people expect from us as a brand. So one thing that we've done is on Facebook, we've live streamed the daily briefings each day throughout lockdown. And, you know, the engagement that we've seen, the people that we've seen tuning into that, you know, we had the Dominic Cummings press conference, and 1.2 million people watched that via LAD's live stream, which surprised even me. So yeah, I think those kind of talking about innovation, exactly like Reece said, forced innovation becomes like adaptability, really, doesn't it? And how you adapt to what this new landscape looks like.
Thank you very much, Sophie. That's that's really interesting to hear across the whole breadth of different stuff that you've done. And we'll come back at the end to understand what some of those adaptations that you've done will remain as we move out of this current period. But thank you so much. That's great to get that perspective. Mark, if I can come to you next. I mean, you know, your company has a clear line of sight into, you know, one of the significant outcomes of this lockdown, you know, which is mental health. What has it kind of meant, you know, for your business in terms of the changes in approach and again some of the innovation that's been made possible?
Yeah, it's a really interesting one. I think our kind of, as you said, our core focus is on mental health, and specifically mental health amongst men. And one of the things we realized quite early as a business is that the key to kind of trying to help the issue and solve the issue is to bring people together. And it's very largely about kind of creating communities of like-minded people to talk about some of the issues that men are facing. So our big focus for the last sort of 2 years since we launched has been on events fundamentally, and bringing people into live spaces. We had a festival last year, and we do various things throughout the year. So obviously when this happened, that rapidly changed. We had a number of events lined up over the next sort of few months, but we quickly began to utilize the technology that was available, as we are now, to kind of continue that engagement with those communities. So we've had a number of live events that we've done via these platforms. We've also kind of done more reach out for user stories as well, and that's been a fundamental thing. I think we'll touch on it a bit later, but community and building that community and listening to what's going on in that community has been fundamental to what we do. And as a result of that, we've seen brands who are kind of really keen to be part of that conversation coming towards us, and I think it's been refreshing to see that there's been a massive shift in the way brands are kind of having those conversations as well. So it's probably been the most important time for us to exist right now, if I'm honest. So it's been very interesting.
Thank you. Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And if just staying with you for a minute, I mean, your company, you know, clearly understands, you know, tone and sensitivity, you know, with the kind of unique perspective that you have. Many brands don't, and therefore at times, you know, could be so kind of paralyzed by the fear of what to do. What advice would you give some of them?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting, and I think Sophie touched on it earlier, which is about listening, and obviously that's one of the key things that we're trying to do more of, which is to listen to your audience and understand them. And there's actually an article out this morning about how brands aren't really in touch with real life aspirations. And, you know, we think that brands are focused on wealth and success and all these things, when actually there's some more important layers of things going on that people are much more concerned about. And I think it's about brands understanding them and getting under the skin of what those things are, so that they can pivot and diversify what they're doing. And I think there are some great brands out there that are doing that. But I think it's about that authenticity conversation that's been raging for a long time now. You know, be authentic, be true to what you are. Don't try and be something you're not, but at the same time, try and do something that's got a bit of meaning behind it. And I know this is a kind of a buzzword of 2020 and probably last year as well, but purpose and meaning is key. And that's everything that we do is kind of grounded in that, really.
Thank you. Yes. And Sophie, I'd love to get your perspective on this as well. I mean, as you know, the kind of tagline or strapline or vision for however you describe it at the Lad Bible Group is around kind of making communities laugh, think and act. So, you know, again, I'd expect you've got to have a pretty good view and sense of how brands need to behave in order to not appear tone deaf.
Absolutely. I think, you know, for me, I think what's been happening in the last 3 to 4 weeks, especially with the Black Lives Matter movement and how, you know, different brands and publishers have been responding to that. I think, you know, the fear of getting it wrong and saying the wrong thing has sometimes paralyzed people. And I think that can actually be one of the worst things you can do. You know, fear, I understand not wanting to be tone deaf, not wanting to get things wrong, not wanting to have people, you know, dig through your past and things like that can be crippling, absolutely. But I think that especially, you know, for Lad, we're talking to younger generations, you know, we're talking to 18 to 24-year-olds. They're so savvy, they're so switched on. They can't be kind of hoodwinked, you know, they want, exactly like Mark saying, you know, that authenticity, that purpose. And so I think that the worst thing you can do is nothing. That's a personal view. Like, I think the worst thing you can do is nothing. I think that it's about, you know, looking inwards as well. You know, so many amazing like brands, but companies, publishers, you've got so many wonderful young people working for you. You know, look internally, start internally, start listening to people, start talking to your staff, start really making them feel like, you know, that they can be a part of meaningful change internally. And then that kind of filters through in the work that they do, you know, and it doesn't just become, we put a picture up on Instagram, that's us done. You know, it's about making those changes internally and being brave enough to do it, I guess, because it's not easy. They're not easy conversations to have. They're not, you know, whether it's dealing with diversity in the workplace, whether it's dealing with maybe the gender divide and pay disparities and all these kinds of things. But the first step is having the conversation. And I think trying to pretend that these issues don't exist is not ideal. Yeah.
And you raised an interesting point there, which is to start inwardly, right? And you know, would that be your advice? You know, so if there is a sense of any brand or business which is potentially just so inhibited by trying to understand what to do, the first place is to look to those within your own, you know, internal community at work to understand.
Absolutely. I mean, you know, if you think about the people that, you know, in your team, in your company, they're your ambassadors, aren't they? They're the people that are going out there. They're the ones that are proud to put I work at blah on their LinkedIn, you know, and everybody wants to work somewhere that they're proud to be a part of. Everybody wants to say, do you know what, actually in my company we did this, or we started doing that. You know, nobody's proud to say, oh yeah, we've got free coffee. You know, no one's walking around saying that, but you'd be proud to say, actually, what our company did, we put our money where our mouth is. We're actually doing internal, you know, for example, like diversity training and all this kind of stuff. Those are things, especially for younger generations, so for your more junior employees, that people want to be proud of where they work. So I think absolutely start with your company that you've got and be listening to them and make them feel like they are stakeholders in the company they work for. Because great ideas, I mean, this is such a cliche, but great ideas can come from anywhere. You know, so that would be absolutely my kind of, my takeaway from that.
Thank you. Yeah, that's great. Thank you very much, Sophie. And so Reece, that kind of perfect segue, really, kind of, communities and loving where you work. You know, Twitter started the hashtag Love Where You Work movement, if that's what it should be called. I don't know, or, you know, certainly started the hashtag anyway. But I mean, that kind of that concept of communities, right? You know, I'd love to get your perspective on, you know, how Twitter thinks about communities today, and, you know, to Sophie's point as well, thinks about the community of work, because, you know, that's perhaps the community that we're all tapped into most of the time.
Yeah, absolutely. So the social community element of Twitter has always been one of our biggest superpowers, right? So the way users come together to drive conversation around culture and to drive change through the use of hashtags, which is, of course, has been around for a while, has been central to the growth of Twitter. So community is something that we absolutely foster inside of Twitter and, of course, on the platform. I think thinking of it outside the platform, or on the platform initially, during the recent months, one of the things we've seen even more so because of the whole stage of lockdown is that people are missing out on these physical real world communities. So whether that be their community of friends that they see on a regular basis, their community that they get together to watch films with or go to gigs with, they're missing out on that community element. So Twitter has become this social community bubble for people to still be able to engage with their friends and also do things that they would typically do with their peers, but this time doing it on social. So we've seen the birth of some amazing social community aspects. So the growth of the watch parties, which is something that I've really enjoyed as a big film fan myself. Seeing things where you can kind of like get together on Twitter with your friends and family to watch Beyonce Homecoming, for example, which absolutely dominated the timeline. Or we partnered with Netflix, for example, for the launch of Michelle Obama's show on Netflix. Another great example of how people were still coming together to create these communities, but doing it on a social platform. In the UK specifically, we saw kind of the birth and the growth of No Signal Radio, which is a black radio internet station, which came out of lockdown and was able to drive kind of sound clash culture, which again dominated the timeline on Twitter, with music fans coming together to discuss who their favorite artists are and why this particular artist has a better tune than that artist. So again, using the platform to really create these social bubbles and these social communities that can make you get that feeling like you're still outside. In terms of the internal social community at Twitter, it's something that's incredibly important to us. As you said, love where you work is a big mantra for us, and it's something that we take very seriously. And in order for us to do our jobs in the best way possible, it's something that we really have to believe in and strive to. So I think the whole notion of kind of, whilst we're no longer in the office, but being able to communicate with each other has been incredibly important. It's something that we're looking to continue to develop as we go forward.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Reese. Mark, you mentioned before, you know, some of the events that you've enabled at the Book of Man and creating communities there. Obviously, events, certainly in the kind of literal sense, in terms of us being there, are not possible. But how are you approaching those communities now? How are you still enabling some of that, you know, important content to be surfaced and to continue to be, you know, shared and proliferated the way that it was?
Yeah. Well, I think as I sort of touched on earlier, we've seen a lot more brands come towards us to want to kind of engage with our audience who are starting to talk about things more openly. And some of the research that we've done since lockdown focuses on what men are going through right now. And there's a key kind of stat, which is actually that 45% are thinking about their mental health more regularly. And so it's this idea that actually people are starting to realise the conversation that's been going on for, you know, particularly in the last 3 years, is really starting to come to the forefront for a lot of guys. And charities like Karl, for instance, have seen a 38% increase in the number of people that are actually approaching them and talking to them. And that's, you know, you can see that as a negative, as oh God, you know, there's a real crisis going on here. But actually, it's positive that people are starting to open up and talk about some of these issues. So I think brands are understanding that more so, and understanding that men aren't wanting to just talk about watches and fast cars and £1,000 suits. They want to start talking about their inner lives and the issues they face. So we've done a couple of projects with, one of them is Giacomo, where we did Giacomo Arm's Length with the Book of Man, which was a series of live Zoom chats, pre-recorded, but put out as live, with the likes of James Haskell, Jason Fox, Professor Green, Conor Benn, etc. So kind of a number of big profile names. And I think we've seen, you know, that taking relevant influencers or relevant names that are active in that space has been really powerful in making it feel, or certainly reinforcing that authenticity, where we're coming from a place where we're giving brands the opportunity to align to something that's really important to a lot of men. We're also working with Talisker Whiskey and Jason Fox. We're doing a podcast which is kind of all around wild tales, and we've been able to record that remotely, and it's actually opened up a whole new breadth of talent and accessibility to people that we wouldn't have normally had. So we're getting people from all across the world getting involved now rather than just in the UK. So there's a number of things which have kind of moved on as a result of this and embracing the tech that we've got. So and I think that's bringing more communities together from different areas, bringing in people that have interests and certain passion points that aren't necessarily in our kind of core, but are coming in and very interested in the central topic.
Yeah. That's really interesting. It sounds to be a real, you know, that first data point you shared, like 38% of men sharing, you know, challenges with mental health. Not that it's increased, that you're just able to measure it, or it's being, we just know about it now. And then that very kind of organic process, by the sounds of it, of how some of those other personalities, but then other brands, you know, just recognize, and it kind of, I don't know, the kind of genie's out the bottle, so to speak, and it's just a way that it just fits, and as you say, is authentic with a number of those brands. Thank you. That's really interesting. Which that kind of touches on the topic I was keen to get Sophie, your view on next, which is you know, around what we might call kind of user generated content. I've been around a while. I remember user-generated content kind of 15, 16 years ago. Is it a bit of an outdated kind of phrase now, in light of how all of us can publish and create? I mean, that great example that, you know, Reese was talking about before, you know, how individuals can scale content production so significantly. Is user-generated content still a thing?
I mean, yeah, it's definitely evolved, hasn't it? You know, I think having this chat has really brought it home for me as well. The fact that it has evolved. You know, one of the things about Lads compared to previous more traditional publishers that I worked at that we have this thing called Content Bible, and we literally have thousands. I think it's 10,000 plus licensed UGC videos, this bank of content that most other publishers would give their right leg for access to. It's absolutely incredible. And, you know, it's always been a key part of what Lad is, you know, the chance to get on Lad Bible and like make a video that's so funny and you make it. It's incredible, you know, and I've worked at brands before where you just don't get that level of reciprocity, and, you know, your audience become your content creators. And it's, I mean, I kind of call it like a content loop. And I think it's evolving now. I work a lot on Snapchat, and, you know, one of the trends that they're talking about for 2020 and beyond is how, you know, content isn't just this kind of passive thing that we sit and watch anymore. You know, some of the best, most engaging content that we're looking at all day is made on a smartphone. Most of us have smartphones now. We all have this ability to become these content creators. So, for example, with Snap, with the amazing stuff that they do with AR, you know, they've got shows where you know, you can swipe up to filters that literally make you a part of the show, whether it's a beauty, a makeover show. You can swipe up to an AR filter that puts the makeup on you as you're watching the show. But then there's also, you've got the amazing kind of boom of things like TikTok, which, you know, I feel so old when I go on there, but it's one of those things where, you know, you sit there and I could spend an hour very easily just in stitches learning all of this kind of stuff. And one of the things I love about TikTok is this idea of, you know, you can create a sound and you're creating a trend in doing that. And, you know, you're creating these trends and these communities of people that like they're like, oh, I've seen somebody do that, here's my version of it, and it becomes this loop. And so, yeah, I don't think the concept of user-generated content is outdated. I just think probably what we think of when we say that is probably outdated. We're thinking of it in terms of going back to like You've Been Framed, send in your videotape for £250, you know, and it's not that anymore. It's something that can be done in seconds if it's posted, if it's picked up, all this kind of stuff. And I think it's really exciting because you're literally seeing faces of all of your audience. You're seeing all of these people jumping on these trends. But it's also exciting from a brand point of view, because there's so many ways that you can kind of infiltrate these worlds and be part of it in an authentic way. So I think it's really exciting.
Thank you, and thank you for bringing You've Been Framed into this. I did not expect a reference to that, but perfect.
Always.
The original.
It's never far from my mind. Never far from my mind.
Thank you. Reece, you touched on it before, right? The great example of, no signal radio, and how, there's been innovation which has, created content during this time. I'm interested to get your view of how you think brands can work effectively with that. In your view at Twitter, when you see the various different kind of trends and innovation that comes from that, what advice would you give to brands in terms of if they're looking to kind of harness some of those new content creation opportunities?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think from a brand's perspective, it's about cultural relevancy and being able to keep your ear to the ground, so to speak. So when we think about user-generated content, it's, like I said, it's an interesting concept because the phrasing has been around for a while. But I think what especially the last few months has shown us is that users are kind of like creating these cultures, and brands have to trust that users and these communities and these individuals are best placed to do that. It's not necessarily a brand's place to create a community, so to speak. So when we talked about it, like the watch parties earlier, that initial one was created by an individual. So it was user generated, but then it grew into something that became broader and something that brands were able to start doing themselves. Same example as we touched on with No Signal and their NS10 V10 show. It's about users coming together and creating something that brands can ultimately down the line connect with and be a part of authentically. Eurovision, again, is another great example of that, which was something that was user generated, but really got the Eurovision conversation absolutely buzzing on Twitter. So in terms of how brands can be a part of it, I think the idea is trusting the users, trust the idea of the user-generated concept. That doesn't mean it has to be shot in low production or whatever, but just trust the idea that users are the ones leading culture, and it's for brands to be able to authentically tap into and be a part of where it makes sense.
Thank you, Reece. Yeah, that's let the magic happen, and don't try and be too contrived is what I'm taking from that. Thank you. Thank you so much. Look, we're getting close to time. I just have one last question for each of you, and then we'll wrap. But Mark, come to you first. During the last few months of lockdown, we've all talked about adaptability and stuff that we've done differently. Is there anything that you've done during that time which you believe you will continue to do moving forward as we come out of lockdown? Oh, I think you might be on mute. I think you might be on.
Yep, sorry, brother. Yeah, we're a really a pretty lean business. There's two of us in the business, and actually embracing the technology that we've kind of probably used once or twice in 3 or 4 years of being in the business. We're now using pretty much every day. That's made us much more efficient. It's mean we can engage with our communities on a much greater scale as well. So I think really the key thing is about using social tools, using this technology, whether it's Zoom, whether it's Microsoft Teams, etc., to kind of expand that reach that we've had in our normal kind of events and day to day.
Thank you very much, Mark. And Sophie, to you, no more Cummings statements potentially, or there might be, who knows? But what else is going to continue moving forward?
Let us not open that can of worms. That's a whole other panel I could talk about. I think for us, what we've started doing in lockdown is every couple of weeks now we have, I call it an Instagram all hands. And because we have people in London, we have them in Manchester, we have them in Dublin, and we have them in Sydney. And it's a chance for not the heads of content, not the big dogs. It's the chance for the guys that are literally at the coalface, doing the posting, doing the scheduling, listening, responding, all that kind of stuff, to get together every couple of weeks and just share successes, things that they've done they're really proud of, but also to kind of use the hive mind, because we have so many great people working here, of, if they have come across something, we did a piece of content, we thought it would do well, but it didn't. Does anyone have any thoughts about why? And just having that conversation where, it has the kind of double benefit of solving problems internally, but also making people feel like they are part of a bigger team, even though we are all at home. And I just think it's been really, really great, and it's definitely something we're going to continue doing.
Excellent. Tremendous. Thank you very much, Sophie. And Reese, lastly to you.
Yeah, for me, I think over the last few months, we've seen how quickly things have been changing. Twitter is already a kind of a very fast-paced platform and a fast-paced organization, and even more so over the last few months. So for us, it's just to continue to remain flexible, keep an eye on kind of how things are changing within culture very quickly, and to just make sure we continue to be at the cutting edge, and just challenging the idea of normal, because as everyone keeps saying, the idea of the new normal, but really there is no normal. So to just continue to challenge and innovate.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Reese. That's a perfect note to finish on. We're up to time. Thank you so much. I thought it was an excellent panel from each of you. I really appreciate your time, and thank you.
Thank you.
Cheers.
Thanks very much.